Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofoutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dine a Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is episode 124, week 10 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. Woo! We are 25 more weeks away from ending Drums of Autumn. It's a very big book. This week we are tackling chapters 16 and 17, and I am calling it At the Abyss. And the summary goes something like this. Jamie surveys the land. Claire follows behind. They hike for miles until Jamie finds a suitable spot. Wild strawberries fill their bellies. They christen the land. Claire speaks her fears. Jamie's confused, then hears her heart. They are each other's half to their whole. They are each the half to the whole. Their love is the first law of thermodynamics. A decision is made. Brianna joins Roger for Christmas. He's about to lose his home forever. Soon she will too. Brianna is conflicted. The past is a frightening place to search. Everyone needs a history. The fire burns between Roger and Brianna. He wants it all from her. He has a plan. But maybe so does she. Inside the chapters. Chapter 16. The First Law of Thermodynamics. Claire wakes to a large gray jay pulling hairs from her head, presumably to make a nest. As a point of reference, gray jays are not found in the southern United States. They are largely found in the northwest U.S. and western Canada due to their like of spruce trees. Claire finds this apropos since she thinks her hair looks like a bird's nest when she wakes. Except for some soreness, she's unharmed by the pulled hairs. The Indians are gone, as is the bear's head. She looks upon sleeping Jamie, and he seems like Adam, though a rather battered Adam well after the fall. Rather a battered Adam, though, on closer inspection. This was a snap taken well after the fall, not the fragile perfection of a child born of clay, nor yet the unused beauty of youth God loved. No, this one was a man full-formed and powerful, each line of face and body marked with strength and struggle, made to take hold of the world he would wake to and subdue it. I moved very quietly, reaching for my pouch. I didn't want to wake him. The opportunity to watch him sleep came rarely. He slept like a cat, ready to spring up at any intimation of threat, and he normally rose from his bed at first light. While I was still floating on the surface of my dreams. Either he had drunk more than I thought last night, or he was in deep sleep of healing, letting his body mend itself as he lay still. She combs meditatively through her hair. There's no place to be, no one to care for. It's slow. Simply time and the nature surrounding her. There lacks confinement in this place of wild. She thinks it's odd. She felt at home in the hospital, and she is at home here in nature. It's her duality. The hospital was a place of control and regimented precision, a place solely for her to practice healing. Nature takes its path, but it's a place of life incarnate, a place she draws her healing from and through it. Claire is a healer at the core of herself. And so if the place to heal means being in a hospital, that's where she'll be. It also confined her emotions. It confined the reality of the continued grief that she was in. She never stopped loving Jamie. The hurt never went away. She was in a marriage with Frank that wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. They were companions and parents, but they put up with each other more than not. And they had a common goal that they were trying to meet in parenting Brianna. So in the wide open, she can connect to the nature that is also so part of herself. It's the pulse of life. It's the continuation of the life cycle over and over again. And that's really who Claire is. She feeds on that, and it feeds her. She finds herself chilled, nipples standing at attention. She is naked, but hadn't taken her clothes off before retiring. She'd encountered Jamie in the night, like a dream event. I pushed back the thick linen blanket and saw the flecks of dried blood smears on my thighs and belly. I felt dampness ooze between my legs and drew a finger between them. Milky with a musky scent, not my own. That was enough to bring back the shadow of the dream, or what I had thought must be one, the great bulk of the bear looming over me, darker than the night and reeking of blood, a rush of terror that kept my dream, heavy limbs from moving. My lying limp, pretending death as he nudged and nuzzled, breath hot on my skin, fur soft on my breast, gentleness amazing for a beast. Then that one sharp moment of consciousness of cold, then hot, as bare skin, not bare skin, touched my own. And then the dizzy slide back into drunken dreaming, the slow and forceful coupling, climax fading into sleep, with the soft Scottish growling in my ear. I looked down and saw the strawberry crescent of a bite mark on my shoulder. "No wonder you're still asleep," I said in accusation. The sun had touched the curve of his cheek, letting the eyebrow on that side like a match touch to kindling. He didn't open his eyes, but a slow, sweet smile spread across his face in answer. The post-battle arousal had hit Jamie. Claire took the brunt of it and had enjoyed it from what she remembers. I'm sure you have had those kind of dreams where you're not sure what happened when you woke up and your partner had encroached upon you in the night. The Indians left a portion of bear meat for their later use. They eat breakfast and quickly bathe in the creek before planning their travel direction for the day. Jamie points out the treaty line in the mountainscape ahead of them. Before leaving Wilmington, Jamie had made certain he knew which lands were available for settling. He also confirmed his information with the Tuscarora they had met and dined with the night before. Together they ride. Jamie is shirtless, with his torn shirt drying behind him on his saddle. Claire notices the scratches are not inflamed nor causing him any problems. He seems less troubled. Lighter in mood than when they started the journey. Their encounter with the Tuscarora hunters had been civil and comforting. One piece of the unknown had become a known entity. She also thinks the trees and landscape play a part in his mood change. This is his place, unlike the coastal plain of River Run. When the forest becomes too dense to ride, they hobble the horses and climb on foot. This is seemingly untouched land. Towering pines and hemlocks, was it? I thought, clambering over the burled knots of a fallen tree. The monstrous trunk rose so high that the lowest limbs started 20 feet above my head. Longfellow had no idea. The air was damp, cool but fecund, and my moccasins sank soundlessly into centuries-thick black leaf mold. My own footprint in the soft mud of a stream bank seemed strange and sudden as a dinosaur's track. It feels like virgin landscape, and nothing has been there since the dinosaurs. We know that Indians have probably traversed there, but they don't leave any mark. So it's fresh and fertile and ready for something new. They reach a ridge. Jamie walks with ease, and she follows behind, gathering interesting plants along the way. She doesn't know what he wants in the land to settle upon. They walk, turn back when they cannot go further, and find a way down. The description is enthralling. I want to hike here. It's seductive in texture, sound, and color, and Claire calls it enchanting. We didn't talk much. Aside from the breath required for climbing, the mountain itself seemed to inhibit speech. Full of secret green places, it was a vivid offspring of the ancient Scottish mountains, thick with forest and twice the height of those barren black parental crags. Still, its air held the same injunction to silence, the same promise of enchantment. The ground here was covered in a foot-deep layer of fallen leaves, soft and spongy underfoot, and the spaces between the trees seemed illusionary, as though to pass between those huge, lichened trunks might transport one suddenly to another dimension of reality. How lush is that? Doesn't it just tempt you to want to go to North Carolina and hike in the back mountains? That's a dream of mine one day. It sounds astonishing, and I can't imagine seeing it when it's virtually untouched by people. It stuns me. Makes me want to go hug everything. She catches a glimpse of white streak above one of Jamie's temples. It brings her back to the cave Abendawe where he was shot by Galus. It's a place she cannot forget. They continue to climb. She's overwhelmed by the beauty. Wonders sprang up by my feet, small orchids and brilliant fungi, trembling and shiny as jellies, shimmering red and black on fallen tree trunks. Dragonflies hung over the water, jewels immobile in the air, vanishing in mist. I felt dazed with abundance, ravished by beauty. Jamie's face bore the dream-stunned look of a man who knows himself sleeping, but does not wish to wake. Paradoxically, the better I felt, the worse I felt too, desperately happy and desperately afraid. All of those emotions that Claire has been having, struggling with the choices that Jamie has, whether it's choosing to be the heir of River Run or choosing Governor Tryon's offer, she's been battling this, and she hasn't said anything to him except about River Run. So this is about to come to a head. When they stop for a rest by a spring, she finds wild strawberries. She gathers handfuls into her cloak. The strawberry juice stains went together with pine pitch, soot, leaf smudges, and dirt. She gorges herself on the tart berries. And Jamie asks her if this is a place that she likes. "What do you think of this place, Sassenach?" "I think it's beautiful, don't you?" "I am thinking, there is a spring here in the wood, that meadow below. It would do for a few beasts at first, and then the land near the river might be cleared and put in crops. The rise of the land here is good for drainage, and here, see?" I looked carefully. To me, the place seemed a little different from any of the steep wooded slopes and grassy coves through which we had wandered for the last couple of days. But to Jamie, with his farmer's eye, houses and stock pens and fields sprang up like fairy mushrooms in the shadows of the trees. Happiness was sticking out all over him like porcupine quills. My heart felt like lead in my chest. "You're thinking we might settle here then, take the governor's offer?" So it's building. The tension is building for dear Claire. Yes, he's thinking of taking the governor's offer. He thinks the strawberries are a sign this is the place they are to settle. It's ours, do you see? Ours? The Frasers, I mean. Strawberries ha' always been the emblem of the clan. It's what the name meant to start with, when a Monsieur Fraselier came across from France with King William, that was, and took hold of land in the Scottish mountains for his trouble. King William, that was, William the Conqueror, that was. Perhaps not the oldest of the Highland clans, the Frasers had still a distinguished heritage. Warriors from the start, were you? And farmers, too. So Claire, her time's coming. She's going to have to spill the beans on her concerns. The Frasers were also farmers, but Culloden killed the clans, any survivors fragmented. Yet Jamie stood tall, warrior and farmer both. Tall and straight in his plaid, the dark steel of a Highland dirk by his side, warrior and farmer both. And if the soil beneath his feet was not that of Scotland, it was the free air that he breathed, and a mountain wind that stirred his hair, lifting copper strands to the summer sun. He knows his place. Jamie goes on to explain how strawberries are a rare plant. Flowers, fruit, and leaves all together at the one time. The white flowers are for honour, and red fruit for courage, and the green leaves are for constancy. I love that definition in the book, but when I looked it up, I could not find that particular definition that Jamie gives. There are several ways the strawberry is considered important religiously and otherwise, though. And again, there's links of interest within the post for this podcast. So go back to the show notes and click on them, and you'll get to read all sorts of fascinating info. Strawberries are considered definitely a good thing when you look at any of the lore or symbolism. Lastly, the fruit is shaped like a heart. Claire tears up. He wipes it away, then drops his plaid and breeks. They're alone, after all. They had been under threat the past days. Now together, they are alone without the need to hold the wilderness away. Jamie claims this is the old way to give fertility to the fields. Okay, so I looked that up as well, and I put a link in on how there were Celtic traditions to give fertility to the fields. This is not a particular one that I found, that an individual person or persons could make love in the field and then add fertility to it. But there's definitely a Beltane tradition that's fascinating to read. Claire sees no fields yet, but she strips down to her nakedness too. They manage the fertility rites, blessing the land and his joy. Claire sees Jamie clearly for who he is. It terrifies her. She tries to keep it to herself, but he hears her thoughts as if she has spoken them aloud. He wore nothing but his plaid, crumpled and blood-stained, belted round his waist. With his hair unbound and tangled round his shoulders, he looked the wild Highlander he was. What I had thought a trap for him, his family, his clan, was his strength. And what I thought my strength, my solitude, my lack of ties, was my weakness. Having known closeness, both its good and its bad, he had the strength to leave it, to step away from all notions of safety and venture out alone. And I, so proud of self-sufficiency at one time, could not bear the thought of loneliness again. I had resolved to say nothing, to live in that moment, to accept whatever came. But the moment was here, and I could not accept it. I saw his head lift in decision, and at that same moment saw his name carved in cold stone. Terror and despair washed over me. As though he had heard the echo of my unspoken cry, he turned his head toward me. Whatever he saw in my face brought him swiftly to my side. "What is it, Sassenach?" And she tells him she's afraid. She must tell him the truth of her fear. Clinging to him, she speaks. He reminds her of his promise. "I gave you 3 things that day. My name, my family, and the protection of my body. You'll have those things always, Sassenach, so long as we both shall live. No matter where we may be, I wonna let you go hungry or cold. I'll let nothing harm you ever. But Claire isn't afraid of those things. Her fear is he'll die. She's uncertain if she can survive without him again. And he makes a joke. She hits him angrily. He doesn't understand what she's on about. Sassenach, you've seen me damn near dead 12 times and not turned a hair. Why ever are you talking on so now? And me not even ill. Never turned a hair? You think I wasn't upset? Oh well, I did think you cared, of course, but I never thought of it just that way, I admit. Of course you didn't, and if you had, it wouldn't make any difference. You Scot! It was the worst thing I could think to call him. Finding no more words, I turned and stomped away. Poor Claire. She's trying so hard to get through to him, and they're on different wavelengths at the moment. She steps on cockleburrs. Limping carefully back to her clothing, she dresses. She fusses about, making nonsensical comments. Finally, she speaks up. Because you're a bloody Highlander and you're all about honor and courage and constancy, and I know you can't help it, and I wouldn't want you to, only, damn it, it's going to take you to Scotland and get you killed, and there's nothing I can do about it. Scotland? Scotland, where your bloody grave is. Ooh, she let the cat out of the bag. He understands her worry about him going to Scotland, but not why she thinks he'll be going there. She's exasperated, explains that where he'll get the settlers for the land. He returns the exasperation. He has no money to travel, the gems are gone, and the money he does have is borrowed. How in the name of God do you think I should do that, Sassenach? I might have when I had gems, but now? I've maybe £10 to my name, and that's borrowed. Shall I fly to Scotland like a bird then, and lead folk back behind me walking on water? You'll think of something, you always do. I hadn't realized you thought I was God Almighty, Sassenach. I don't. He thinks of her words. He walks, and then he has a solution for the settlers he needs. The men he was in prison with were transported to the colonies. Claire thinks if he can find them, they won't want to pick up and follow. He reminds her she did this very thing for him. Claire relaxes, her fear easing. Then she thinks of the huge task of tracking the men down. She asks after Anticosta's offer. He explains why his answer is no. I have lived as a slave, Claire, and I couldn't live knowing there was a man on earth who felt toward me as I have felt toward those who thought they owned me. I reached down and covered his crippled hand with my own. Tears ran down my cheeks, warm and soothing as summer rain. You won't leave me? You won't die? He shook his head and squeezed my hand tight. You are my courage, as I'm your conscience. You are my heart, and I your compassion. We are neither of us whole alone. Do you not know that, Sassenach? You are my courage, as I am your conscience. You are my heart, and I your compassion. We are neither of us whole alone. Do you not know that, Sassenach? I wanted to say it both ways, so it was very clear. I do know that. That's why I'm so afraid. I don't want to be half a person again. I can't bear it. There's the whole of it right there. We finally get to the bottom of what's bothering her so much. She needs to know he won't die and leave her. That line is why I believe this is a book about them as a couple more than the ultimate telling of his story. even though they end up in his time and we learn more about his history than hers. After she left him at Culloden, he was dead. She was in the future, 200 years. Kai remembers the vast, despairing pit she had to climb from after her return to the 20th century. They loved each other even while dead to the other during their separation. I was dead, my Sassenach, and yet all that time I loved you. I loved you too. I always will. So long as my body lives and yours, we are one flesh. And when my body shall cease, my soul will still be yours, Claire. I swear by my hope of heaven, I will not be parted from you. That is something we all long to hear. That is the love that we strive for. That's what makes love worth finding. This is unending devotion of the heart and spirit. Now you can just take a moment to breathe in the beauty of those words. People wonder why Outlander readers hold their books and characters so dear. If the naysayers would only read them, they would know we are not crazy. We are merely in love. He tells her nothing is lost, Sassenach, only changed. And Claire says, that's the first law of thermodynamics. No, that's faith. Energy exists. It can only be transformed. It cannot be added to or lessened in the universe. Thermodynamics. I did put a link in for all the laws that go with it. These tender moments between them, when it's just them, and their fears and concerns have to be hammered out, and expectations need to be stabilized. The fact that Jamie had been a slave. Yep, I bet you didn't see that coming. Remember, he was at Hellwater for all those years. And though he was a paroled prisoner, he was still a prisoner. He couldn't leave. He didn't have his own way. He had nothing of his own. And they didn't treat him well. He had to sleep in the stable with the horses. He wasn't even allowed in the house. How terrible. Part 6, Je t'aime. Chapter 17, Home for the Holidays. Inverness, Scotland, December 23rd, 1969. Roger frets while waiting for Brianna to arrive. He wished Mrs. Graham and the Reverend could be here to meet her, and he thinks of their advice when he thought he was in love as a teenager. If you have to ask yourself if you're in love, laddie, then you aren't, Mrs. Graham had assured him, tapping her spoon on the edge of her mixing bowl for emphasis. And keep your paws off wee Mavis McDowell, or her da will murder you. When you're in love, Rog, you'll know it with no telling, the Reverend had chimed in, dipping a finger in the cake batter. He ducked in mock alarm as Mrs. Graham raised a threatening spoon and laughed. And do mind yourself with young Mavis, lad. I'm not old enough to be a grandfather. Sounds about the same advice everybody gets, right? They would really love Brianna. December 24th, 1969. Fiona is there giving him last-minute reminders of the meal she prepared. She asks if he's sure they don't want to come along to Ernie's mother's house. Roger assures her they'll be fine and to enjoy their holiday. She turns and kisses Roger right on the lips. This gets Ernie's attention. Then she wishes him a happy Christmas before leaving. Somehow, Brianna and Roger make lunch without blowing up the manse. The house is nearly cleared out. Roger is relieved. There is a stack of books on the table. They're Frank Randall's books, all autographed. She takes the books and places them in a box for herself. Roger really is going to miss the place. He grew up here. But the church owns the manse. His dad lived there for more than 50 years. But the new minister has his own home, so Ernie and Fiona are going to live there after the wedding. Brianna is concerned Roger's home will be gone. And really, Brianna is in a similar situation coming up. She plans on putting her parents' house on the market in the summer. Roger clues into her emotions about packing up and losing her house for good. The house is too big for her to keep. He suggests she might get married. Maybe she thinks she'd live in the manse with him. You know, there's something for frankness. It would keep them out of a lot of trouble, these two. He blurts out asking if she wants children. She does. He does too. But really, he wants to practice making babies with her just now. Oh, of course you do. They kiss. He bent his head and kissed her again, slowly this time. She had the most wonderful mouth, wide and full-lipped, almost too big for her face, but not quite. He had her round the waist, his other hand tangled in silky hair. The nape of her neck was smooth and warm under his hand. He gripped it, and she shivered slightly, mouth opening in a small sign of submission that made him want to lean her backward over his arm and carry her down to the hearthrug. And a brisk rapping made him jerk his head up, startled out of the embrace. There's a knock at the door. The nosy postman breaks the moment. It's a letter for Brianna. The postman is snooping instead of putting the letter in the slot. He meddlingly wants to know if they're alone. Well, a fictitious Uncle Angus is napping upstairs. Uncle Angus is a stuffed Scotty dog. They finally get the postman to leave. The letter is from the library at her university. A book she wants is not available. Roger says he could have helped her look for him. She knows how to research. She did used to help Frank. And Roger now insists she needs tea, even though she hates it. She also really hates whiskey. But he doesn't want to drink alone and wants her to join him. When she gets up to pour the hot water in the teapot, he tells her she has a right to know who Jamie Fraser was. He's her father. To Brianna, Frank Randall, Daddy, was her father. I had a father. Daddy Frank Randall. He was my father, and I love him. Loved him. It doesn't seem right to go looking for someone else like he wasn't enough like. That's not it then, and you know it. It's nothing to do with Frank Randall or how you feel about him. He was your father, and that's not a thing will ever change that. But it's natural to be curious, to want to know. Roger knows what it means to miss a father. He needed to make him real when he was young. He made stories up about him. The Reverend understood and started to tell him the real stories of his dad, Jerry Mackenzie. He told the little things. He made him real for Roger. Even though it made Roger miss him more, he was glad to know. As they talk, she lets him splash some whiskey in her teacup. And she asks after his mother. I had a few memories of her. I was nearly 5 when she died, and there are the boxes in the garage. All her things, her letters. It's like Dad said, everybody needs a history. Mine was out there, I knew if I ever needed to, I could find out more. Roger's correct. Everybody needs a history. She drank and held her cup out for more. She's afraid to look for Jamie and her mother. But Mama, at first, I tried to pretend she's gone, like on a trip. And then when I couldn't do that anymore, I tried to believe she was dead. She isn't, though. That's the trouble. I have to miss her all the time and know that I'll never see her again. But she isn't dead. How can I mourn her when I hope she's happy where she is, when I made her go? She wants to find her and them, but whereas Claire didn't make it or died along the way, or any number of things. More whiskey is poured into her cup. She felt guilty when she saw Frank's signature in the books. Is it wrong for her to look? He thinks she should look, and he'll help her. But she needs a nap just now. That's a lot of whiskey for a girl who doesn't like whiskey. She makes it upstairs only to vomit in the bathroom. The whiskey was a bit much. She sleeps. Roger works, checks on the cockaliki soup, and cleans up from their tea. Roger is sad his home will be gone for good. That's why it's taken him so long to go through the Reverend's things. The reason it's getting done now is that Fiona plans to move in. He unpins the last paper from the corkboard. It's his genealogy written in the Reverend's hand. The generations of Mackenzies listed. He thinks he may change his name back to Mackenzie. The Reverend hadn't known the story of the woman Roger gets his green eyes from. She's nowhere on the list. William Buccleuch Mackenzie, the changeling, given to his foster parents to raise, is. He was the illegitimate child of Dougal Mackenzie, clan war chief, and the witch, Galis Duncan, also known as Gillian Edgars and Galis Abernathy. Galis wasn't a witch, but a dangerous woman. Did he inherit the ability to travel through the stones? He knows the fine line between curiosity and ambivalence and searching for those in the past. That's it. That's the last box. The room now stands empty. He stops at the stairs. Brianna had bathed. She was in the hall in nothing but a towel. She didn't see him. His heart thuds and hands sweat. She was modestly covered. He'd seen more of her in the halters and shorts she had worn in the summer. It was the fragility of her covering that roused him, the knowledge that he could undress her with one quick tug, that and the knowledge that they were quite alone in the house. Dynamite. He's mesmerized by her. And when he comes to her, she looks him straight in the eyes. He knows what she'll feel like, what she'll smell like. The towel falls from her hair. The bronze snakes of her hair fell gleaming, brushed his cheek with wet. Not a Gorgon's beauty, but a water spirit's, changing shape from serpent-maned horse to magic woman. Kelpie, he whispered against the flushed curve of her cheek. You look like you've come straight out of a Highland burn. She put her arms around his neck, then let go of the towel. Only the pressure of their bodies held it between them. Her back was bare. Cold air from the window raised the hair on his forearm, even as her skin warmed his palm. He wanted at once to pull the towel about her, shelter her, cover her from the cold, at the same time to strip both her and himself, take her heat to himself, and give her his own, right there in the damp and drafty hallway. Steam, God, you're steaming. Her mouth curved against his. That makes two of us, and you haven't had a bath, Roger. Oh, those two. It's getting spicy up in here. And they kiss. She presses against him. He can imagine how her breasts look by how they feel about him. Becoming off balance, they tumble to the floor. "Hey!" She grabbed for her towel, then abandoned it as he lunged over her, kissing her again. He'd been right about her breasts. The one under his hand was bare now, full and soft, her nipple hard in the center of his palm. Dynamite, and the fuse was lit. He yearns to touch her. She urges him on, but he doesn't want to bed her like this. He wants it to be good the first time, better than this. And the burning soup is the distraction they need. He runs to get it, and she goes to get dressed. So that's distraction number 2. The first was the nosy postman. The nosy postman. And now the burning soup that he had assured Fiona he wouldn't mess up. In the kitchen, his guilt rises. He shouldn't have acted how he did toward her. He's concerned she'll think he took advantage. She had wanted him to, though. He was familiar enough with the language of the body to know desire and surrender when he touched them. But what he'd felt in that brief moment when her body came alive to his went a great deal farther. The universe had shifted with a small, decisive click. He could still hear its echo in his bones. He wanted her. He wanted all of her. Not just bed, not just body, everything, always. Suddenly, the biblical injunction, one flesh, seemed something immediate and very real. They'd nearly been just that, on the floor of the hallway, and stopping as he had made him feel suddenly and peculiarly vulnerable. He wasn't a whole person any longer, but only half of something not yet made. So now he feels a half of a whole that he wants. That's a tough place to be. The soup is ruined. He decides they'll eat in a pub before church services. Then she'll say yes. When they come back to the manse, love will be a sacrament. Why, then they would come home to a house dark and private, with themselves alone on a night of sacrament and secret, with love newly come into the world. And he would lift her in his arms and carry her upstairs on a night when virginity's sacrifice was no loss of purity, but rather the birth of everlasting joy. Roger switched out the light and left the kitchen. Behind him, forgotten, the gas flame burned blue and yellow in the dark, ardent and as steady as the fires of love. Roger is a traditionalist, a romantic. He's a good man. He's quite like Jamie. We haven't seen his strength and grit yet, but I have no doubt we will. Jamie has made his decision. Claire is on board, though concerned. Roger is hopefully in love with Brianna. She seems to share his feeling, but we don't see her internal dialogue, only his. We cannot be sure of what is going on inside her head and heart. She's torn about looking into the past. What if she finds her mother and it's bad news? What about her love and devotion to Frank? What is Roger planning after the evening mass? These are all questions that will be answered in the next podcast. It's interesting to me because people often say Roger is so boring. Well, if you only look at everybody through the lens of Jamie Fraser, well, then he might be boring. But Jamie's kind of chaotic. It's just mishap and mayhem and running all over the place and getting involved in everything. That doesn't always suit every person. Claire's up for the adventure, but she was raised on the road after her parents died. Roger is a historian. He's a professor. And he's rooted. But he wants Brianna. He wants a life and children and to be her family. And she seems to feel the same way. but she's also holding something back. Why would Brianna, who is such a, quote, good girl, somebody who spent lots of time with Roger, an ample opportunity to bed him and not, why would she urge him to do so when they were in the hall of the manse? Doesn't that seem a little odd? Like, what's going on with her? It seems outside of her really significant Catholic values that was passed down to her and that she holds very dear. So Claire seems like she's a bit more grounded with the decision. I could see her trepidation. They have to clear land. They have to get families, everything from scratch. 100% is on them. Where are they going to get the money for that venture? That's huge. It's an amazing opportunity, but it's so much risk and it's scary. If I went to go buy a place in a remote area of the mountains now, I still have access to people. I have access to equipment. I have access to help. I have all the modern amenities. I'm not going up there with my bare hands and whatever knowledge I can bring with me. So it does seem a bit terrifying. No doubt as people move into that place, Claire will have work to do. And they're very close to the treaty line with the Indians, if you noticed. There are places in North Carolina that were settled similarly, and one of my very close friends, her family's from the mountains of North Carolina. She lived there when she was very small and still has property there. I would love to visit and see it and explore it with my own eyes and feet for hiking, just to take it all in. It sounds magnificent. So what's coming up next week? Chapters 18 and 19. And if you're wondering how you can participate, well, you can email me at contact@adramaofoutlander.com or leave me a voicemail on the listener line at 719-425-9444. And if you're reading ahead, you can leave comments and then I can include them in the podcast that they apply to. You can also participate by sharing the post that the podcast is in, telling friends about it, sharing the Apple Podcast link in iTunes, the Stitcher, the Google Play links. You can follow on Twitter at Dram of Outlander, on Instagram, Dram of Outlander, on Facebook, the page and the group are A Dram of Outlander. You have to ask to join the A Dram of Outlander community group. You have to answer 3 simple questions, and it's a good place to be. We're building a Dram of Outlander community for others to be part of. It's a really kind place to be, and I rarely have to moderate there. That's the caliber of people who follow and are part of my social media, so I'm really excited about that. On Wednesday nights, there's usually a Twitter chat at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern under the hashtag ADOO. Join in and we talk about the prior week's podcast, the chapters, the characters, where things are going, what we're excited about, and any news that has come out for Outlander. We have not gotten a lot from season 4 filming yet. We know it's underway. We see some pictures from Matt Roberts. And there have been some still photographs in between filming takes, because in Scotland their laws are different than the United States and other places where filming can close down sets that are outside. They can't do that in Scotland. People can simply watch the filming going on. What I do caution against as fans, if you are in Scotland and you happen to see filming, don't record it on video on your phone. Still pictures, which shows some behind the scenes, that's okay, but do not share actual film clips. I mean, that really breaks the surprise for all of us. And it's tough for those who are working on the show when people show any kind of clips. So just be kind spectators if you are there, please. They can't close the external sets down. It's just not how it's done there. The other thing you can do is follow the website, adramofOutlander.com. And finally, you can financially support the podcast. I'm a solo person. Every single dollar counts in keeping this running properly and everything as it should be and moving forward. You can go to patreon.com/adramofOutlander, and you can offer as little as $1 a month. Or if you want to do a one-time offering, you can email me or leave a voicemail and I will let you know how to do that. I appreciate you greatly. Like I said, and I say every week, without you, there's no reason for me to do a podcast. I would just do the rereads, but I enjoy the bit of analysis at looking at the characters, tying together the foreshadowing and the symbolism. Why does she put in certain details? Like, I wanted to know what bear meat tasted like, so I put in a link for you guys to click on to learn about bear meat. One of the facts is that whatever a bear has most recently eaten, that's what their meat will taste like. So if they've eaten fish, you're going to get a fishy flavor with the gamey meat. But if they've had berries, because they're omnivores, you get a sweeter meat. So, nothing I had any idea about before I did the podcast. But there's plenty of links in here. I want to hear your feedback, your comments, questions, thoughts. Tell me what more you'd like to hear. If you design an Outlander related or inspired product that you would like to give away on the podcast, please let me know. Email or voicemail is fantastic. But I thank you for joining me for this read along. It's a lot of months to be doing this, just like we did last year with Voyager and some of the novellas. And depending on when Outlander launches in the fall, well, we might get to another novella this time around. So I thank you for listening, and I appreciate you from the bottom of my pea-picking podcasting heart. And until next time, slàinte mhath.